That winter Sunday, the smell of spices filling the kitchen and the simmering rice on the stove were as familiar as the feeling of emptiness that had settled deep inside me long ago, without me even realizing it. 52 years of marriage. 7 decades lived, and there I was, still chopping onions for Sunday lunch while waiting for the family to arrive. The tears streaming down my face weren't just from the onions. They were also from the exhaustion of a lifetime dedicated to others, rarely to myself. Just then, my cell phone buzzed. My granddaughter had taught me how to use this device that, according to her, would connect me to the world. Little did she know that, on that day, it would connect me to the truth everyone had been hiding from me. A photo in the family WhatsApp group. A photo that shouldn't have been there, accidentally sent by my sister-in-law, Marilyn. In the picture, my husband Arthur, at 73, was smiling as he held the hand of a woman I'd never seen before. "Look who I ran into at the restaurant yesterday," the caption read. For a moment, my heart simply stopped. My fingers, wrinkled and marked by time, trembled as I did what my granddaughter taught me. I took a screenshot. A few seconds later, the image vanished from the group, but it remained saved on my phone and in my soul. I watched the reactions. Surprise emojis, vague messages like oops, and finally, my 94-year-old mother-in-law, who was as sharp as ever. I don't think that was meant for here. No one tagged me. No one asked if I had seen it. It was as if I, Abigail, didn't exist in that group, despite being the wife for over 5 decades. I went back to stirring the beans while digesting the information. 52 years of marriage. 2 children. 5 grandchildren. A great-granddaughter on the way. And yet there I was, the last to know my husband was leading another life. "Grandma, are you feeling okay? You look pale." It was my eldest granddaughter, Gabby, whose voice brought me back. She had arrived early to help me. I looked at her and wondered, did she know too? "I'm fine, honey. Just the weariness of age," I lied with a smile. The first of many lies I would tell in the coming months, while pretending nothing had changed. 2 hours later, the whole family was gathered around the table. 15 people eating the beans that had almost boiled over while I contemplated the end of my marriage. I watched each face carefully. My eldest son with his wife, my daughter with her husband and their 3 children, my sister-in-law Marilyn with her husband, my mother-in-law, and of course, Arthur. Conversations about politics, sports, the price of gas. No one mentioned the elephant in the room. No one asked about the photo, and in that moment, I understood that they all knew. "The beans are a little salty today, aren't they?" My daughter-in-law commented with a polite smile. "Like life, my dear, like life," I replied, watching Arthur's face turn pale. That night, lying next to the man who had shared my bed for over 5 decades, I pretended to sleep while planning my next steps. There was no room for tears, not yet. There was something almost liberating in that moment of absolute clarity. As if, at 72, I could finally see the truth that had always been there, obscured by decades of self-sacrifice. "Are you okay, Abigail? You're breathing differently," Arthur's voice sounded. "In the dark, I'm just dreaming, Arthur, dreaming of a different life," I answered, without opening my eyes. In the days that followed, I adopted a strategy I had never used in my entire life: observing in silence. I started noticing patterns in Arthur's behavior that had previously gone unnoticed. How he always left looking sharper on Tuesdays and Thursdays. How he smiled at his phone when he thought no one was looking. How he had started wearing new cologne at 73. Details that, put together, told a story of betrayal that had likely been going on for years. 2 weeks after the photo incident, I invited my sister-in-law Marilyn for coffee. At 67, Marilyn had always been the modern one in the family, the one who traveled alone and had Instagram. We met at that nice cafe she loved, far from the family's prying eyes. "What a surprise, this invitation, Abigail. You never really liked this place," she commented as she sat down. "At 72, I'm still figuring out what I like and don't like, Marilyn," I replied, watching her face tighten slightly. "Like that photo you posted in the group. I didn't know my husband frequented that restaurant." The silence that followed confirmed my suspicions. Marilyn fidgeted with her napkin, adjusted her glasses, took a sip of water. Abigail, Spare us, Marilyn. Spare us the humiliation of more lies. I just want to know how long you've all known." Her eyes filled with tears. 3 years, more or less. It started after he retired. The woman is an ex-coworker, a widow, 60-something. "Younger then," I commented with a calmness that surprised us both. "Abigail, we tried talking to him. Well, not everyone, but Carl and I told him it wasn't right. But you know your husband, always so." She hesitated. "Convincing?" I completed. "Yes, I know him well. 52 years together tend to give you that familiarity." The sarcasm dripped from my voice like bitter honey. "And the rest of the family? Your son knows. Found out about 2 years ago when he saw them together at a restaurant. There was an argument, but then, you know how male loyalty is." Loyalty. I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. What an interesting word to define complicity and betrayal. "Abigail, try to understand. Nobody wanted to hurt you. You'd already been through so much with losing your sister, then the heart problem. Everyone thought it would be worse for you to know." I took a sip of the coffee that had gone cold. "So you decided for me, all of you, sitting around some Sunday while I made lunch, voted on what Grandma Abigail should or shouldn't know about her own life. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Marilyn. But now the rules have changed. That same week, I opened my own bank account, something I'd never had in my adult life. We always shared everything, Arthur and I. Or so I thought. With the help of my granddaughter Gabby, the only one I decided to trust, I transferred half of the savings from the joint account. It was the money from the sale of the beach condo 2 years ago, plus my share of the retirement funds that always went directly into Arthur's account. Grandma, are you sure about this? Maybe you should talk to Grandpa first." Gabby seemed worried as she helped me at the bank. "My dear, at 72, I've learned that some conversations are only productive when you already have a plan B. Your grandfather had 3 years to talk to me. Now it's my turn to set the terms. Over the next month, I maintained the same outward routine. Sunday lunches, calls to the kids, even occasional outings with Arthur. But inside, something had awakened. A strength I didn't know existed. Mental clarity that decades of condescension had clouded. One afternoon, while tidying the bedroom, I found motel receipts in Arthur's wallet. Not recent ones, those he surely hid better, but from 6 months ago. The pain I felt wasn't from the betrayal itself, but from the memory of that specific date. It was the day I had been hospitalized with heart complications. While my children took turns at the hospital, my husband was in another woman's arms, spending the money that should have been for our future. I carefully folded the receipt and stored it in an old sewing box, where I had already begun collecting other evidence. Screenshots of conversations on Arthur's phone I managed to see when he left it unlocked. Notes of dates he claimed to be somewhere but was seen elsewhere. Even a list of expensive gifts that had significantly depleted our savings in recent years. "What's all this for, Grandma?" "Why don't you just confront him?" Gabby asked when I showed her my growing collection of proof. "Because, my dear, when you're a 72-year-old woman who has dedicated her entire life to her family, you need absolute certainty before you shake the foundation. It's not just about exposing an affair. It's about reclaiming my dignity, my financial independence, and yes, maybe a little bit of the youth I lost taking care of others." One day, during a family lunch, I decided to test the waters. We were all gathered, as usual, when I casually mentioned I was thinking about taking a trip alone. "How absurd, Abigail." My mother-in-law, Clementine, was the first to react. "A woman your age, traveling alone. What will people think?" "Probably the same thing they think about a 73-year-old man dating another woman, Mom," I replied with a serene smile, observing the awkward silence that fell over the table. My son choked on his wine. My daughter-in-law pretended not to hear. My sister-in-law, Marilyn, stared at her plate as if the secret to eternal life was written there. "You're talking nonsense, Abigail," Arthur finally answered, but his voice betrayed his nervousness. "Am I? What a shame. I thought after 52 years of marriage, we could finally be honest with each other." I served more salad, as if we were just discussing the weather. This dressing turned out particularly well today, don't you think? The secret is the balsamic vinegar. Expensive, but worth every penny. Just like discretion, isn't it? 3 months after discovering the betrayal, I enrolled in a basic computer class at the community center near home. Arthur laughed when I told him. At your age, Abigail? What for? You can barely send a text message. Exactly why, my dear. A woman my age needs to stay updated. You never know when you might need to manage on your own, right? The class opened up a world of possibilities. Not only did I learn to use the computer and phone better, but I met other women my age with stories similar, or worse, than mine. Women who had found purpose and independence after 70, after decades believing their only value lay in caring for others. One of them, Loretta, became my closest friend. At 68, she had divorced after discovering her husband had a second family in another city. You know what was worse, Abigail? It wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I had wasted 40 years being just someone's wife, never myself. Her words resonated deeply within me. How many times had I been introduced as Dr. Arthur's wife? How many skills, desires, and dreams had I abandoned to be the perfect wife, the dedicated mother, the available grandmother? And what had I received in return? A husband who, at 73, still preferred the thrill of deceit to the tranquility of mature love. In the 4th month after the discovery, I started attending a painting studio, resuming a hobby I had abandoned when I got married. To my surprise, my hands, now more wrinkled and spotted, still knew how to dance across the canvas. Each brushstroke felt like releasing years of repressed emotions. I started with gentle landscapes, but soon my art became more expressive, almost turbulent, depicting older women in moments of rupture and liberation. This is intense, Mrs. Abigail, the young teacher Matthew commented when I showed him. A canvas of an elderly woman breaking chains. There's a strength there I don't see in many young students. Experience has its advantages, Matthew. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn to turn pain into something beautiful, or at least honest. In the 5th month, during my mother-in-law's 95th birthday party, the first major turning point occurred. We were all gathered in the community room of her condo building. The same usual people, the same superficial conversations, the same collective pretense. But this time, I wasn't willing to participate in the family charade. When it was time for the toast, I picked up my glass and stood up. Everyone expected the traditional speech from the devoted daughter-in-law, full of praise for the matriarch and memories of good family times. To Clementine, I began, observing the approving smiles, who taught us important values like loyalty, honesty, and respect. The smiles began to waver, who showed us the importance of keeping up appearances above all, even if it means allowing her son to cheat on his wife for years, with the knowledge and complicity of everyone. The silence that followed was absolute. I saw my mother-in-law's face pale, my children freeze with their glasses in the air, and Arthur look at me as if I were a stranger. Abigail, you're upset. Arthur tried to intervene, his voice trembling. Upset? No, my dear. I'd be upset if I continued pretending I didn't know everything. About your mistress Eliza, the meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the money you diverted from our retirement, savings to please her, and especially the complicity of every person in this room. So, yes, let's toast to the family and its values. I raised my glass, took a sip, and then calmly placed it on the table. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a painting exhibition to prepare. My first, at 72. Better late than never, right, Clementine? I left that party with trembling legs, but my head held high. The phone didn't stop ringing for the rest of the night. Calls from my children, messages from my daughter-in-law, even a terse text from Arthur. We need to talk. I turned off the phone and, for the first time in decades, slept deeply, without worrying about what others would think of me. The next morning, turning the phone back on, I faced 37 unread messages. The last one was from my granddaughter Gabby. I'm proud of you, Grandma. I'll be there in 30 minutes. When Gabby arrived, she found me painting in the small office I had improvised at home. Grandma, the whole family is in an uproar. Grandpa spent the night at Aunt Marilyn's, Dad is furious, saying you humiliated everyone, and great-grandma is blaming your behavior for the heart palpitations she had this morning. I continued applying shades of red to my canvas. Your great-grandmother will survive. She survived 2 world wars and 5 husbands. A daughter-in-law finally showing her claws won't kill her. Gabby sat beside me, watching the painting take shape, an elderly woman with her back to a burning house, looking towards a sunny horizon. What happens now? She asked softly. I put down the brush and looked at my granddaughter, the only one who had seen me as a person, not just as someone's grandmother or wife. Now, my dear, the rest of my life begins. The following week was a whirlwind. Arthur finally came home, not to apologize, but to demand an explanation for my inappropriate behavior at his mother's party. 52 years of marriage, Abigail. 52 years thrown away because of your whim. I sat calmly in the living room armchair, observing the man I once loved with all the intensity a 20-year-old could muster. Now, at 72, I saw him clearly, not as the villain of the story, but as a weak man, trapped by social conventions that allowed him to believe infidelity was his right. Whim, Arthur? Is that how you classify my dignity? That's how I classify this unnecessary public display. If you had doubts, you could have asked me privately, like a respectful wife would. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A genuine laugh that sounded decades younger than I was. Respectful? Like you were respectful? Sleeping with another woman while I was in the hospital? Or how our family was respectful, hiding everything from me for years? I stood up, feeling a strength that came not from muscles, but from the soul. No, Arthur. The time when I accepted crumbs of respect in exchange for my unconditional devotion is over. What do you want then? Divorce? At our age? Have you lost your mind? On the contrary, I've finally found it. I walked to the bookshelf and picked up a folder I had prepared. Here are the terms my lawyer prepared. Yes, I have a lawyer now. Mr. Henderson, Loretta's nephew from the computer class. I suggest you read them carefully. His face paled as he flipped through the documents. Half the house? Half the retirement funds? This is robbery. This is justice, Arthur. 52 years building a life together gives me that right. And before you try to hide assets, know that I have copies of all our documents, including that Cayman Islands account you think I don't know about. His eyes widened. It was a bluff, of course, but it worked. For decades, I had left the finances in his hands, signing documents without reading, trusting blindly. Now, his reaction confirmed there were more secrets beyond the mistress. The following week, our children organized a family council. Without me, initially. When I found out through Gabby, I demanded to participate. I found them at my eldest son's house, all wearing solemn expressions as if at a funeral. Mom, my son began. We're concerned about your recent behavior. These classes, these strange paintings, this talk of divorce. Don't you think you're overreacting? I looked around the room. My 2 children, their spouses, my mother-in-law, who had apparently made a miraculous recovery from her heart issues, and of course Arthur, sitting at the head of the table like the wronged patriarch. Overreacting? I repeated the word, feeling its weight. Hiding from me for 3 years that your father was having an affair was extreme. Deciding for me what I should or shouldn't know about my own life was extreme. Thinking that, at 72, I should simply accept. The crumbs of dignity you want to offer me is extreme. Mom, we understand you're hurt, but at this age, a divorce. At this age? I interrupted my daughter-in-law. At this age, I should accept anything just to not cause trouble. At this age, I don't deserve respect, honesty, loyalty. What age would be appropriate to demand the basics of a marriage? Tell me? My mother-in-law, always so controlled, couldn't hold back. In my day, women endured these things with dignity, in silence. Your public scandal humiliated us all. I turned slowly towards her. In your day, Clementine, women died in silence, consumed by disappointments and unfulfilled dreams. Maybe you chose that path. I choose another. I left that meeting certain that I had lost part of my family, but regained something much more precious. My voice, my autonomy, my ability to decide for myself. In the months that followed, the divorce proceeded with the expected slowness of the legal system. Arthur tried everything, from contesting the value of assets to threatening to leave me with nothing, claiming I had never contributed financially to the family. As if raising 2 children, managing a household, and supporting his career for decades had no economic value. During this period, I immersed myself in painting with an almost obsessive dedication. My small office became an improvised studio, with canvases scattered on the floor and paints occupying every available surface. I painted stories of women, not just mine, but of all those I met in the classes and support groups I started attending. My exhibition, initially intended only as a therapeutic exercise suggested by Loretta, took shape and substance. A small gallery, managed by a niece of a friend from the computer class, offered to show my work. "Your paintings have an authenticity we rarely see, Mrs. Abigail," young Patricia said when visiting my makeshift studio. "There's pain there, of course, but mostly there's a journey of liberation that many women will identify with." I titled the exhibition Rebirth at 72, a declaration that it's never too late to start over. The date coincided by a twist of fate with what would have been our 53rd wedding anniversary. I sent invitations to the entire family without expecting them to attend. To my surprise, some came. My daughter, who had initially sided with her father, showed up with her husband and their 3 children. Gabby, of course, was there early, helping with preparations. Some old friends, neighbors, and especially the new friends I had made in the classes. The biggest surprise was the presence of my mother-in-law, Clementine, supported by a cane and her caregiver. At 95, she decided to confront her own contradictions to be there. "Your paintings are disturbing, Abigail," she commented, while observing a painting showing an elderly woman with her back to a broken clock. "But there's an honesty in them I can't deny. Maybe if in my time we had this freedom..." She didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. In that brief moment of vulnerability, I glimpsed the woman behind the rigid facade. A woman who had also made sacrifices, swallowed disappointments, adapted to the limitations of her time. "It's never too late, Clementine," I replied, holding her wrinkled hand. "At 95, you can still tell your story." Arthur didn't show up, of course. Instead, he sent a bouquet of red roses, the same ones he gave me every wedding anniversary, with a card that simply read, "Forgive an old fool." I asked Gabby to place the flowers at the entrance of the exhibition, next to a painting depicting an elderly woman burning old photographs. Beside it, I placed an enlarged cutout of the card, with a caption I wrote by hand. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's the freedom to move on." 17 paintings were sold that night, a number that surprised everyone, including me. The i.e. money, added to the share I received in the divorce settlement, finally concluded after 8 months of legal battle, allowed me to fulfill an old dream, buying a small apartment in St. Augustine, Florida, a city I had visited only once, decades ago, and promised myself I would one day return to. I moved the following winter. A simple apartment, facing the sea, decorated only with essentials and a dedicated space for my studio. Gabby came with me for the first few weeks to help me settle in, but soon understood that I needed that time alone. "Are you sure you'll be okay, Grandma?" Alone, in a new city, far from family. I looked out the window at the rough July sea, so similar to the turmoil my life had been over the past year. "I'm not alone, my dear. I'm with the woman I spent decades ignoring, myself." Some family members tried to dissuade me, obviously. "A woman your age, living alone? What if you get sick? What if you fall? What if..." The list of concerns was endless, all masking the real discomfort. A 73-year-old woman choosing her freedom over the convenience of others. "If I fall, I'll get up. If I get sick, I'll call a doctor. If I need help, I'll ask." Like any adult would, I replied, tired of the constant infantilization. In St. Augustine, I found a community of older artists who, like me, had discovered or rediscovered their passion for art after 60. Weekly, we gathered at one another's homes for painting sessions, discussions about techniques, and, inevitably, sharing life stories. It was at one of these gatherings that I met Edward, a 75-year-old widower who had been a literature professor before dedicating himself to sculpture. Our connection was immediate, not romantic initially, but a friendship based on mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it meant to start over in later life. When Beatrice died, I thought my life was over too, he told me during a sunset on the beach. It was 40 years of a happy marriage, 3 kids, 7 grandkids. Afterward, just emptiness. It took me 2 years to understand that honoring her memory didn't mean stopping living. His words resonated deeply. For so long, I had defined my existence through Arthur and the family we built. Now, I was learning to define myself by myself, my choices, my desires, my art. That Christmas, I returned to Chicago to spend the holidays with the family. I rented a hotel room, politely declining invitations to stay at my children's or mother-in-law's houses. I needed that space of my own, that independence I had fought so hard to achieve. Christmas Eve dinner was at my daughter's house, a smaller gathering than the traditional ones, with notable absences, including Arthur, who had opted to spend the holidays with his brother in Milwaukee. Or perhaps with Eliza, his former mistress who, according to family rumors, had officially become his partner. During dinner, my mother-in-law, now 96 and increasingly frail, asked to sit next to me. For a long time, we sat in silence, watching the Yao family interact. "You know, Abigail," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "All my life, I followed the rules. I was the obedient daughter, the devoted wife, the selfless mother. I believed that would bring happiness, or at least peace. But seeing you now, there's a light in your eyes I never had." I held her wrinkled hand, feeling the fragility of the bones beneath the thin skin. "It's never too late, Clementine. Never too late to discover who we really are." She smiled, a sad smile, laden with decades of conformity. "For me, it's too late. But I'm happy for you, even if it came at the expense of my son's reputation. Your son's reputation was damaged by his own choices, not by mine," I replied, gently but firmly. At the end of that visit, I returned to St. Augustine with a mixed feeling of melancholy and liberation. I had lost much in the past year, a 5-decade marriage, some friendships, even a certain comfort in the known routine. But I had gained something far more valuable, the most authentic version of myself. The journey wasn't easy, nor is it complete. There are days when loneliness weighs heavily, when I miss the familiarity of a life shared for so long. There are nights when I wake up and, for a confused moment between sleep and wakefulness, expect to find Arthur beside me. There are Sundays when the smell of beans cooking brings an almost suffocating wave of nostalgia. But there are also mornings when I wake up to the sun rising over the sea, with no obligations other than those I choose for myself. There are entire afternoons dedicated to painting, without interruptions or commitments. There are new friendships, based not on family ties or social conventions, but on genuine affinities and mutual respect. And there's Edward, whose friendship has evolved into something deeper, not a replacement for what I lost, but something entirely new. A mature companionship between two people who have lived long enough to know what they want and what they don't, free from social expectations or family pressures. "I never imagined that at 73 I'd be starting a new chapter," I commented to him, during a candlelit dinner on my apartment balcony. "Life rarely follows the script we plan," he replied, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of his 76 years. Maybe that's the beauty of it. On the anniversary of discovering that photo on WhatsApp, the trigger that unleashed this whole transformation, I held my second exhibition. Rebirth, 1 year later, was mounted in a larger gallery, with 32 works documenting my journey. I sent invitations to the entire family, including Arthur. This time, to my surprise, he came. Thinner, looking older, but still with that elegant posture that always characterized him. I watched him from afar as he walked slowly among the paintings, pausing longer at one showing an elderly woman standing on the rubble of a house, looking towards the horizon with a suitcase in her hand. I approached silently, stopping beside him. "It's beautiful work, Abigail," he commented without looking at me. "I always knew you had talent. I'm sorry I didn't encourage it more. Thank you for coming, Arthur." We stood in silence for a moment, Two strangers who once shared 5 decades of life. "Are you okay?" he finally asked, turning to look me in the eyes. "You seem happy." "I am," I replied simply. "Not every day. Not without difficulties. But yes, I'm okay. And you?" He shrugged, a strangely youthful gesture for a 74-year-old man. "Surviving. Eliza and I, well, it didn't work out. I guess nothing replaces 52 years of shared history." I felt a pang of something. Not exactly pity, perhaps a deeper understanding of what we had both lost and gained. Shared history is valuable, Arthur. But it's not everything. Sometimes you need to write a new chapter, even if it's alone. At the end of the exhibition, when almost everyone had left, I found a discreet envelope left beside the guest book. Inside, a sheet of paper with Arthur's familiar handwriting. "Forgive me for not being the man you deserved. Your courage shames and inspires me. Live fully, Abigail. You always deserved more than I knew how to give." I carefully folded the paper and put it in my purse. It wasn't a reconciliation, nor did I desire one. It was recognition of my strength, my worth, my autonomy. A dignified closure to a 5-decade story. I returned home that night, to the small apartment facing the sea that was now my refuge and my kingdom. I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the moon reflected on the dark water, and felt a peace that had escaped me for decades. At 73, I had finally understood the most important lesson. It's never too late to break silences, shatter patterns, rewrite stories. It's never too late to discover who we really are when we free ourselves from others' expectations and find our own voice. And never ever is it too late to be reborn.